I was relaxing in my living room when I heard frantic knocks on my door. I opened it to find my two grandsons, Max and Leo, sobbing uncontrollably. Both were disheveled, with tear-streaked faces and incoherent mumblings. I brought them inside, trying to calm them down and find out what had happened. They were so upset it took a while before they could form full sentences. What they finally managed to say made my heart race, and I immediately called 911. "Are you sure?" I asked as I jumped up to grab my phone, and they both nodded, still too upset to speak. I felt myself turn pale, but I understood that there was no time to lose, and I needed to act quickly. Besides, I needed to keep myself calm and composed for my grandkids. They had come to me for help, and they needed my support more than ever right now. Police were coming. Moments later, I was speaking to an emergency dispatcher on the phone, and I explained the situation. "Keep an eye on them, ma'am. We'll be right there," the dispatcher told me, and I thanked them for their help. The boys were still crying after I hung up the phone, and I decided to make them a cup of tea, hoping it would calm them down. I was feeling sick to my stomach, but I did my best not to show it. They had disappeared. As I returned to the living room, I saw that it was empty. "Boys?" I called out, checking the rest of the rooms. "Leo? Max?" I began to get worried, and I felt myself panic as I saw the front door wide open and realized that they had left. It wasn't safe for them out there. This was turning into a nightmare. But what did Max and Leo tell their grandma? Why had they disappeared? And what was she going to do now? I was going crazy. I ran outside, desperately calling their names as I looked down the street. They had to be here somewhere. They couldn't have gone far, I told myself. I knew the police would get here any moment, but each second felt like an eternity. I called my daughter Eliza, but she wasn't picking up. There was nothing I could do but wait, and I felt like I was going completely insane. The police arrived. Finally, I heard sirens in the distance, and they became louder and louder until they shut off and a police car appeared in my driveway. "Officer, please! They have disappeared. I think he has taken them. Oh my God!" I cried, and the officer tried to calm me down as soon as he got out of the car. "Ma'am, just breathe. I'm sure we'll find them," he said, and he led me into my home. I told him what had happened. Officer Richards asked me for a description of Max and Leo, and I showed him a photo of the two of them. I had plenty of those in my home, as they were my only grandchildren yet. I also told him everything they had told me. They had been playing at a friend's house, and suddenly, a man entered the house. A thief! But they said he had a gun, and they depended on me. I burst into tears again. I couldn't even think about all the horrible things that could happen, or they could have already happened. I started crying even harder, but the officer managed to get me to my senses and calm me down. "Miss, you're the only person here who knows what happened. You have to tell us, or we can't help them." This was a disaster. I realized that my grandkids depended on me, and I took a deep breath before continuing the story. The thief had a gun, and he attacked the friend's parents. He kicked them both unconscious, and then he took the little boy and ran. I think Max and Leo have gone looking for him. They were so worried," I explained, and the officer immediately called for backup, searching the house. Soon, more police cars arrived, and Officer Richards led his team to the friend's house. His name was Jason, I think. I stayed at home, anxiously staring at the phone, waiting for Eliza to call me back. She would never forgive me if anything happened to the boys. I waited and waited, knowing she was likely in surgery. She worked at the hospital and unable to check her phone. She'd call as soon as she could, I was sure of that. But then, it was empty. Officer Richards returned. "The house was empty. We didn't find anyone. The boy, his parents, or your grandsons. We're organizing a search of the area now. Please stay here in case anyone returns," he told me. A dreadful feeling washed over me. "Officer, please find them," I pleaded. He nodded and walked away. I knew the next few hours would be critical. Officer Richards organized the search, and the police split into teams to comb the neighborhood. They moved swiftly, talking to neighbors and checking any suspicious areas. I stayed behind, wringing my hands and pacing the living room. The house felt eerily quiet, missing the usual laughter and noise of my grandsons. I silently prayed, hoping that they would be found safe and sound soon. This weight was unbearable, but I had to trust that the professionals knew what they were doing. I couldn't sit still, so I stood by the window, alternating between watching the street and checking my phone. The kids' toys lay scattered around, a stark reminder of their absence. Each sound, each movement outside heightened my anxiety. Would the next police car return with news about Max and Leo? My chest tightened every minute that passed, but I refused to leave my post by the window. Suddenly, my phone buzzed. It was a message from my neighbor, Mrs. Borkowski, asking if I needed help. My hands trembled as I typed out a quick response. Mrs. Borkowski had always been kind, but this situation required more than just neighborhood camaraderie. What if she had seen something that could help? I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself before hitting send. Any piece of information could be the breakthrough we needed. I replied that my grandsons were missing and asked if she'd seen anything. Seconds felt like hours as I waited for her response. Meanwhile, the officers were still out there, hopefully closing in on some kind of lead. My heart raced, and I fought to maintain my composure. This wasn't just about finding Max and Leo anymore. It was about pulling together every possible resource to ensure their safe return. She responded that she'd seen a man dragging a small boy toward a black van earlier. My stomach churned as I read the words repeatedly, hoping I had misunderstood. This wasn't just a suspect in our minds anymore. It was a real person who had been seen taking a child. I knew I had to act fast, so I quickly relayed this new information to the authorities. My heart pounded, and I immediately relayed this information to Officer Richards. "Please, you have to hurry. My neighbor saw someone dragging a child to a black van," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. The officer listened intently, nodding as I spoke. His face grew serious, and he assured me that they would act on this new lead immediately. I remained by the window, clinging to this sliver of hope. He instructed the dispatch team to be on the lookout for a black van and to use the neighbor's description to assist in the search. "We'll find them," he promised before rushing out the door. I watched as the officers coordinated their efforts, their communication rigorous and focused. It felt like a small wave of relief, knowing they now had a target. But the wait was far from over. The police expanded their search perimeter, but hours dragged on with no new leads. The house, once filled with noise and life, now felt empty and foreboding. Each tick of the clock heightened my fears. Friends and neighbors occasionally stopped by to check on me, offering their support, but reality was that we were still in the dark. Every passing minute felt like an eternity, with hope seeming to wane. The uncertainty was eating me alive, but I forced myself to stay strong. I had to believe that Max and Leo would be found and returned safely. I paced back and forth, trying to distract myself with menial tasks, yet my mind was solely focused on the missing boys. They were out there somewhere, and I couldn't allow despair to dominate. The police were doing everything they could, and so could I by staying composed. Out of nowhere, my phone buzzed again. This time it was a call from my daughter, Eliza. I knew I had to stay calm as I shared every harrowing detail with her. As she absorbed the information, I could hear her voice shaking, but she tried her best to stay composed. We couldn't give in to fear. We had to believe that Max and Leo would be safely home before long. Just then, my daughter Eliza called from the hospital. I took a deep breath to compose myself before answering. "Mom, what's going on?" she asked, sounding alarmed. I tried to stay calm as I filled her in, The weight of the situation settled heavily on my heart, and Eliza's voice quivered when she realized the gravity of what was happening. This wasn't just my worst nightmare, it was hers too. I filled her in on everything, from Max and Leo's appearance at my door to their mysterious disappearance. "They were crying so hard, Eliza," I said, my voice breaking. "And now they're gone. The police are searching, but there's still no sign of them." There was a pause on the other end, and I could almost hear her heart racing through the phone. "Mom, this is terrifying," she whispered. She was horrified but tried to stay composed, asking if she should leave work to help with the search. "Do you need me to come home?" she asked. I heard the panic in her voice, but also determination. She was ready to drop everything to find her boys. "I can call the hospital and let them know. I really think I should be there," she insisted. Her voice was a mix of fear and resolve. I told her to stay put for now. The police were doing everything they could. "Eliza, they're on top of it. They have a team combing the neighborhood," I reassured her. "But Mom," she protested. "Please, just stay. We need all hands on deck here. I'll call you the moment there's any news," I said firmly. Eliza hesitated, but eventually agreed, her voice tinged with the frustration of being far away. Eliza updated her colleagues about the situation, urging them to notify security to be on high alert. "I've told them about Max and Leo. Everyone's looking out for anything unusual," she said. Her colleagues were supportive, rallying around her and offering help. "You focus on finding the boys, Mom. I'll do everything I can from here," she assured me, her voice strong and steady, despite the underlying worry. They quickly found Max and Leo and Jason's parents, but Jason was gone. The relief was indescribable when I saw the boys, but it was overshadowed by the new worry for Jason. The officers brought them back to our home, and I embraced them so tightly, fearing to let them go again. Max and Leo clung to me, their small bodies trembling, but Jason's absence was a heavy weight on all our hearts. My relief was short-lived as the true terror sank in. Jason was still missing, and the boys were the only ones who might know where he was taken. "Do you know where Jason is?" I asked them, desperately hoping for a lead. They both shook their heads, eyes wide with fear. "It's okay. You're safe now," I soothed, but the absence of Jason left an unspoken dread looming over us. The officers tried to question Max and Leo, but they were too traumatized to offer any helpful information. "He took Jason and ran," was all Max could mutter. Leo just clung to my leg, unable to speak. The officers exchanged worried glances. They needed more, but the boys were in no state to provide details. "We'll need to bring in someone who can talk to children," one of the officers suggested. I held them tightly, whispering words of comfort and hoping they'd eventually tell us more. "You're safe now, my loves. Grandma's got you," I murmured. Their small hands gripped mine as if letting go meant losing everything. I didn't push them for answers. They'd been through enough. Instead, I focused on creating a sense of security, whispering promises that everything would be okay, even if I wasn't sure myself. Eliza kept texting, increasing my anxiety with every vibration of my phone. "Any updates? Have they found anything new? Mom, are you okay?" Each message heightened my stress, but ignoring her was not an option. I responded as best as I could, updating her with the little information I had, but the constant pinging only reminded me of the urgency, the ticking clock, and the ever-growing dread. The officers decided to consult a child psychologist to help coax the information out of Max and Leo gently. They needed someone who could understand the boys and make them feel safe enough to talk. Watching the psychologist interact with them, I hoped some breakthrough would come. It was obvious they'd been through a lot, but a trained professional might be exactly what was needed to unlock their memories and guide us to Jason. In the meantime, Search teams continued combing through the neighborhood and surrounding areas. Each new report from the field was shared over the police radios, though none brought the news we desperately hoped for. Officers knocked on doors, peered into every corner, and spoke with anyone who might have seen something. The community was coming together, but the growing darkness outside was a harsh reminder that time was running out. Jason's parents were recovering, and the police took their statements to piece together more details. It was a slow process. The trauma they'd endured made recalling specifics difficult. Nevertheless, fragments of their encounter were crucial. Every tiny detail they could remember might point us in the right direction. Their faces mirrored the same fear and hope I felt, reminding me that we were all connected through this terrifying experience. Mrs. Borkowski came over, bringing some food and offering to stay with me. Her presence was a small comfort amidst the unfolding chaos. She insisted I eat something, but my stomach was too knotted with worry to truly manage it. Her quiet companionship, however, was a welcome distraction from the relentless weight of my thoughts. Her kindness reminded me that, even in dark times, support often came from the most unexpected places. We sat in tense silence, jumping every time the phone rang. Both of us were on edge, anxiously waiting for any new development. The minutes felt stretched, each second heavy with the weight of unanswered questions. Where was Jason? Who had taken him? Each ring of the phone brought a mix of hope and fear, but mostly it was just police updates or concerned calls from friends. We needed a breakthrough. And soon. Hours went by, and Max finally started to mumble something about the scary man taking Jason. His tiny voice, barely a whisper, echoed in the quiet room. Mrs. Borkowski and I leaned in closer, doing our best to stay calm. "It's okay, Max. You're safe now. Can you tell us more?" I asked gently. It wasn't much, but it was a start, and it might be the lead we needed to find Jason. The psychologist listened patiently, encouraging him to share more. "You're doing great, Max," she said softly, smiling reassuringly at him. Max fidgeted nervously, but continued. He took Jason. He was so scary." His eyes filled with tears again, and the psychologist nodded understandingly. "It's okay to be scared, Max. You're very brave for telling us. Anything you can remember will help us find Jason," she said soothingly. Leo added that the man seemed to know Jason's family and that Jason had screamed the man's name. Frank. The officers took note of this new piece of information, their expressions growing more serious. "Do you remember anything else about Frank?" the psychologist asked gently. Leo shook his head, but just having a name was a significant step forward. "You both did great," I assured them, hugging them tightly. The officers immediately started checking records to see if anyone by that name had a connection to Jason's family. They huddled over their laptops and phones, cross-referencing all sorts of databases. "It's not a common name, but it's something," one of them said. Watching them work gave me a glimmer of hope. "We'll find him," Officer Richards assured me. His confidence was comforting, but the minutes ticked by slowly. One of the neighbors across town reported seeing a man and a boy fitting Jason in the suspect's descriptions entering a rundown apartment building. The new lead made my heart race with cautious hope. Officer Richards and his team prepared to move quickly. "Stay here, we'll take it from here," he instructed. I nodded, holding Max and Leo close. The sense of urgency was palpable, and now we just had to wait for the next update. Officer Richards and his team raced to the address while I stayed home, praying for a miracle. My heart pounded with every passing second, the fear of the unknown overwhelming. I clung to the hope that this new lead would be the breakthrough we were all desperately waiting for. My mind raced with what-ifs, but I tried to suppress them, focusing on the possible miracle. Eliza was on her way from the hospital, finally managing to leave work. She had called in earlier, frantic and desperate to be with us. "I'm on my way, Mom. I can't stay here knowing my boys need me," she had said. Her determination provided a small comfort amidst the chaos, knowing she would soon share this burden. We both prayed silently for Jason's safety, each of us anxious for news. On her arrival, we hugged tightly, sharing our fears and hope for Jason's safe return. Eliza's face was pale, eyes wide with worry, but she tried putting on a brave front for the boys. "Any updates?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. I shook my head and sighed, feeling the weight of uncertainty bearing down. "We just have to hold on and trust the officers," I whispered, squeezing her hand. Updates from Officer Richards came sporadically. They found evidence the man had been there but had already left. "They were here, but it looks like they moved quickly," Richards reported over the phone. Each update was a mixture of hope and frustration. Progress was being made, but the man and Jason were always one step ahead. I clung to every word, waiting for the one that would end our nightmare. Leo and Max, calmer now, mentioned hearing a train horn close by during their flight through the neighborhood. "We heard it loud and clear, Grandma," Max said quietly, looking up at me with wide eyes. This detail seemed to strike a chord with the officers. "That's useful information. Thank you," Officer Richards replied, noting it down. This small detail could be the key to narrowing down their location. This led the police to examine the nearby train station and its surroundings. The search extended to the platforms, the ticket booths, and every shadowy corner. "It's a logical place to hide or make a quick escape," one of the officers remarked. With renewed energy, teams coordinated their efforts, determined to cover every inch. The clock was ticking, but now we had a specific direction, a tangible lead to follow. The search team scoured the train station, speaking to staff and reviewing security cameras. Ticket attendants, janitors, and commuters were all questioned. "The cameras should tell us something," an officer said, focusing on the screens. Each snippet of video footage was carefully analyzed. "Did anyone see a man with a boy here recently?" they asked repeatedly. Bits of information began to emerge, slowly painting a clearer picture of their whereabouts. A ticket attendant recalled a man and a boy buying tickets to a nearby town. "They didn't look out of place, but now that you mention it, something seemed off," he said. The officer noted this crucial lead and thanked him. This new information boosted everyone's spirits. With the destination now potentially known, the officers swiftly moved to coordinate with neighboring towns' police, ensuring all eyes were on high alert. With this new lead, officers from the adjacent town were contacted to look out for the suspect. "We're expanding the search. They might be hiding out nearby," Officer Richards explained. Coordination was critical. Communication lines buzzed with updates and strategies. "Every available officer is being notified," Richards assured us. The scope of the search widened, bringing renewed hope that the breakthrough we needed was right around the corner. Eliza, Max, Leo, and I stayed together, anxiously awaiting updates. The house was filled with a heavy tension, punctuated by hushed conversations and occasional phone calls. "We're doing everything we can," Richards had said, and I clung to those words. The boys clutched their toys, seeking comfort in familiarity. Eliza and I shared nervous smiles, attempting to ease each other's fears. The minutes dragged, each one a lifetime of waiting. Outside, I noticed a small crowd forming. Reporters had begun to arrive, no doubt looking for any information they could latch on to. Camera crews set up equipment while journalists scribbled notes. The story had reached local news headlines, amplifying the sense of urgency. Seeing them only heightened my anxiety. Their presence was a constant reminder of the ongoing nightmare. We were now the focus of the community, and everyone was watching. Officer Richards pulled me aside, his face serious. "You need to avoid speaking to the media," he cautioned. We don't want to jeopardize the investigation. I nodded, understanding the gravity of his advice. Eliza and I shared a look of agreement. We couldn't risk any misinformation leaking out and complicating the search. Let them do their job, I told Eliza, trying to calm my own storm of nerves. My mind raced with the possibilities. Where could the man be taking Jason, and why? Each scenario that crossed my mind was more terrifying than the last. None of it made sense. Who was this person, and what did he want with Jason? I paced the living room, each step filled with dread and unanswered questions. The unknown gnawed at me, making it impossible to settle. Then the breakthrough came. Officer Richards walked in, his expression grave. "We have new information," he began. "The man we're looking for is Jason's mother's ex. He believes Jason is his child, but he's not." The room fell silent as we absorbed this bombshell. Eliza gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. This revelation changed everything, adding layers of complexity and desperation to the search. This revelation caused the tension in the house to spike even higher. We were all on edge, our nerves fraying by the second. "What does this mean for Jason?" Eliza asked, her voice shaking. The officers exchanged serious looks. "It means our suspect is delusional and potentially dangerous," one of them explained. The urgency intensified. We couldn't afford any missteps now. The weight of the new information settled heavily on us. The officers revealed they had dug into the man's background, uncovering a history of paranoia and unstable behavior. "He has a pattern of this kind of erratic behavior," Officer Richards explained. Hearing this made my stomach turn. It added a new layer of fear to the already dire situation. Knowing his instability only made the clock tick louder in our minds, pushing us further into a state of urgent anticipation. As teams moved in on the suspect's potential hideouts, the situation became increasingly dangerous. "We have to tread carefully," an officer commented. The words hung heavily in the air. The sense of impending danger was almost palpable. We watched helplessly as the officers carefully planned their next moves, knowing that one wrong step could aggravate the suspect. It felt like walking on a tightrope, and each moment grew more precarious. Negotiators were put on standby, understanding the delicate nature of the kidnapper's mental state. "We need specialists for this," Officer Richards explained. Their services could be critical in calming the situation and safely retrieving Jason. Watching them prepare, I felt a small sense of relief. They know what they're doing, I reassured myself. In this high-stakes game, every move mattered, and the experts were ready to act swiftly and carefully. The police huddled over maps and intelligence reports, discussing strategies and backup plans. The room buzzed with focused activity. "What if he's not at any known locations?" someone asked. Every possibility was considered, each plan meticulously crafted to avoid mistakes. The tension was thick, but there was also a sense of determined purpose. I watched them, grateful for their relentless efforts, but desperate for them to act immediately. Emotional exhaustion started to weigh on me, but the drive to find Jason and make sure Max and Leo were safe kept me going. I couldn't afford to break down. The boys needed me strong. Eliza was a rock, showing strength despite the worry etched on her face. Though the hours dragged on, our collective hope and determination propelling us forward. We had to find Jason. The final update came. Officers located the suspect in a small cabin outside of town. The air felt electric as we all held our breath, awaiting further details. Officer Richards relayed the information swiftly, his voice steady but urgent. I clutched the phone tightly, hoping this would be the moment we had all prayed for. The officers positioned themselves around the cabin, preparing for the next critical steps. They were able to approach him quietly, managing to arrest him without incident. "We've got him," Officer Richards confirmed. The words were a balm to my anxious soul. The team worked with precision, ensuring no harm came to anyone involved. Back at home, the sighs of relief were almost synchronized. The nightmare seemed like it was on the brink of ending. It felt surreal, as if I couldn't quite believe it. Jason was unharmed and returned safely to his parents. Tears welled up in my eyes as I received the call. "He's okay. He's really okay," I kept repeating, scarcely believing the words. Officer Richards assured us that Jason had been checked by medical professionals and found to be in good health. The emotional storm began to settle as the reality sank in. Jason was safe, and my heart felt a little lighter. The authorities confirmed that Frank, the suspect, irrationally believed Jason was his son from a past relationship, despite it not being true. This twisted misunderstanding added a tragic complexity to the entire situation. "Delusional and paranoid," Officer Richards explained. It was heartbreaking to realize that Frank's distorted mind had led to such peril. Understanding his motives didn't make the situation easier, but it clarified the reasoning behind his alarming actions. Back at home, the news brought a huge wave of relief. I hugged Max and Leo tightly, thankful for their bravery and quick thinking. "You were so strong," I whispered, kissing their foreheads. Each of their tiny smiles brought a fresh wave of tears. Gratitude overwhelmed me as I envisioned how much worse it could have been. The boys were safe, and now so was Jason. The terror was finally lifting. Eliza and I shed tears of relief, gratitude, and exhaustion. We held each other, letting the pent-up emotions flow. "It's over, thank God," she murmured. The boys clung to us, sensing the shift in atmosphere. Relief turned into slow, weary smiles shared between us. Safe and sound, they could finally relax. In that shared moment, all the fear, worry, and near despair felt like a distant memory. We were whole again. The officers were praised for their swift action, and I felt immense gratitude toward everyone who had helped bring the nightmare to an end. Officer Richards received special commendations for his leadership and dedication. I made sure to thank each officer personally, expressing how deeply their efforts meant to our family. There wasn't enough gratitude in the world for what they had done. Their professionalism and empathy had made all the difference.